Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Today's chapters are 2 Chronicles 20 and 21. Now, we're dealing today with the story of Jehoshaphat. Now, you will say, I've already read that story before, haven't I, in the Bible? In fact, so much of 1 and 2 Chronicles, in fact, about 50% of it has already been written in the book of Samuel and the book of Kings. And so some people, when they read Chronicles, they actually skip over it. They say, look, I've read these stories before. But they're very different. And this is the reason that God has it in the Bible. Well, firstly, they're written about 100 years apart. The book of Samuel and Kings was written while the children of Israel were in captivity. And they were giving the reason as to why God had allowed the Babylonians to come and invade. Whereas the book of Chronicles now is written just at the end of captivity, into the emergence into a new day. And so the emphasis is not in explaining why they went into captivity, but the Davidic promises, the messianic promises, the promises of a new temple, the promises of a new day. And so, the big themes in Chronicles are focusing on David. Why? Because he was the one who the messianic promises were promised through. They were focused on Judah, not on wayward Samaria and wayward northern kingdom. They were focused on Judah. And in addition to that, they were comparing. So we're in a stage today in 2 Chronicles where there's a big comparison between the good kings of Judah and the bad. They're like character studies showing that God blesses those who follow him wholeheartedly. Now, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles was not 2 books in the original. It was one book, one narrative, one story. In fact, the storyline of Israel, in fact, so detailed, it's actually at the back of the Jewish Bible because it gives a full summary of the Jewish history. But it was put into 2 because of scroll length. So it was just divided in 2. So we look at now Jehoshaphat. He was one of the good kings of Judah. And we see this particular battle where, he's concerned. This massive army coming out of En-Gedi comes towards him, a huge alliance of enemies. And God says to him, listen, I'm going to fight for you. They're going to get caught in a gorge. You just go out there and worship. And as you worship, they're going to turn on each other and they're going to kill each other. And this actually happens, and they leave so much plunder. It takes 3 days for Jehoshaphat and his men to get the loot and to bring it all home, and a massive reputation develops in the region, and fear over the power that God seems to be exerting through Jehoshaphat. And so it's a delightful story. Jehoshaphat comes to the end of his reign, and he does one thing at the very end that the writer of the Chronicles points out. This wasn't good. What he does is he makes an alliance with the northern kingdom, and that's because his son, who was quite wayward, married one of Ahab's daughters. So there was like this intermarriage, and they build a trading fleet together, a fleet of ships. And then God says, no, I don't want that. I don't want you running this close with them. So he destroys the trading fleet. And so the trading fleet is destroyed. But chapter 21, then we see Jehoshaphat's son, Jehoram, who was a nasty piece of work, married to Ahab's daughter. He wipes out all his brothers, and God brings judgment on him and says, listen, this is not right, and you're going to be ill, and you're going to be attacked. And so once again, what is this story telling us? It's telling us that, now that you out of captivity, that God is rebuilding a nation. Learn the lessons from the past. And maybe it's a good idea for us to look back in our history and to say, when did God lift his hand? When did God allow circumstances to discipline us and to chastise us? Learn from your history. That's what the chronicler was saying to the Israelites, that God's chosen you, he's picked you, and don't walk the ways of the northern kingdom.